Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon, and I've been investing in property for over 20 years. And if you're an active landlord or planning your next property investment, this podcast is for you. This week, I'm trying a slightly different style of episode. I'm going to cover a few of the more important, as I see them, property investment related news stories from the last few weeks. So let's dive straight in with probably the biggest sort of change that's coming for landlords and property. And that is, of course, the Renters' Rights Bill. And it has been back in the Commons in the last few weeks. In fact, on the 8th of September. Government rejected almost everything suggested by the Lords, and it will now need to go back to the Lords for them to agree or not with what the government has decided. That return to the Lords isn't scheduled yet, so it looks like that's probably not going to happen before the conference season recess, which is coming up imminently. So it now seems the Renters' Rights Bill will probably become law around late October or early November. The commencement date, i.e. when tenancy agreements will actually change, when we actually need to work out a new way of running rental properties, has not been decided yet, and probably won't be decided for a little while yet. People who know more about this than me seem to think it will probably be mid to late 2026 that commencement date is actually set for, but really we will just have to wait and see. If you want to read more, including details on the actual amendments that the Lords suggested and the Commons rejected, I really do recommend reading Suzanne Smith's website, and I will include a link or possibly a couple of links to different articles that she has on her website and that she is maintaining and updating as new changes occur and the bill progresses through Parliament. Next up, I have seen a couple of articles about Making Tax Digital, and not just in the dark corners of the internet that discuss tax every day, but in mainstream landlord publications. I've talked lots about Making Tax Digital before on this very podcast and elsewhere, and I will link to some of those past episodes in the show notes if you want to dig deeper into some of the topics I've discussed previously. A quick summary though, because it seems there are still a lot of people out there in property, including landlords who will be affected, who don't know about this yet. So my apologies if you know already and you're hearing me repeat this again, but for those who don't yet know, if you own property in your personal name and receive rent of more than £50,000 per year, you need to get ready for Making Tax Digital from April 2026. That's just next year, not long away now at all. If your rent is over 30,000, then you need to be ready from April 2027. And if your rent's over 20,000, then you need to be getting ready from April 2028. It is worth noting that if you also have a sole trader business, you must combine your property and business income, that's turnover from both the businesses, not profit, when checking against these limits. HMRC have recently, in the last month or so, updated their software page for Making Tax Digital to try and make it more helpful, to guide you through finding the kind of software that you might need. Unfortunately, I don't think they've done a terribly good job of this at the moment, and I think they've actually made it harder to use and sadly much harder to really understand the results that you get, because almost whatever option you choose, it currently says there's no software that will answer everything you're looking for, which is true, but you probably would need to be looking at a combination of software, which isn't as scary as it may sound, because they will all talk to each other via the HMRC systems, but it is a little bit more complicated to understand. And I don't think HMRC have really mastered explaining this as yet. They are still working on it. This is not sort of their ultimate and finished page forevermore. So you can go there and get a list of software at the moment and start looking through what it is you might need and what you might want to use. But the actual process and guide to that will hopefully be getting even better as time progresses. In more sort of personal news on this point, PATMA has now been approved by HMRC and is on that official list of software that is ready for making tax digital for income tax. The next news item is new sanctions checks for agents. So if you are a letting agent, a new requirement was introduced a few months ago, requiring you to check landlords and tenants against official sanctions lists. Self-managing landlords, interestingly, are not covered by the same rules, at least not at the moment, and do not need to introduce these extra checks against sanctions or against the sanctions lists. For landlords using an agent to help you with your lettings, to manage your properties, the chances are you've already been through these checks, as they've been part of anti-money laundering checks that agents have to do against customers, particularly, so i.e. landlords, for quite a while. So there's not really anything new there. It's more on the tenant side of things that the actions have really changed for letting agents. So for most listeners, I do expect this to be a bit of a non-story, but I thought I'd mention it as an example of changing letting agent regulations that in this case, landlords often aren't aware of because it doesn't necessarily directly affect them. It's not just landlords directly that are being hit with many changes to regulations. Next up is a couple of stories. And in fact, there were more as well that I could mention, but I've picked a couple that I will link to in the show notes. And these are around suggesting that the rents are struggling a bit. There was a report from Hamptons that says that rents have fallen by 0.4% since last year, the second largest decline since 2011, apparently. And then there was another report from Zoopla that says rents are up 2.4% since last year. Now, these don't seem to quite agree, but anyway, Zoopla still went on to say this is the slowest growth in 4 years. So even though they thought the rent had gone up, they did want to mention that it had not gone up by very much, and indeed a lot less than normal. Zoopla do also mention, though, that rental supply is up 19% and rental demand is down 24%. So I think that's perhaps more significant than the ups or downs of average rents that these people can't seem to agree on. I will also mention that back in episode 301, just a couple of weeks ago, in my monthly market review, I noted that rents have stalled a bit earlier than normal this summer. Larger property rents managed a slight increase still over summer, while smaller properties saw a slight decrease over summer. A lot of this change is seasonal and relatively normal for this time of year, but it's all about how much rents are changing and when they are changing just a little bit earlier, maybe, rather than a little bit later as they normally would be at this time of year. So I think it's subtle changes that can sort of skew the numbers enough, but there are still, it seems, some changes this year from normal. Zoopla's extra information about the supply and demand changes in the rental market, as compared to the same time last year, does seem to suggest the outlook for rents doesn't look so great for the near future, at least. Unfortunately, it does tend to be January before we see rents picking up again. If you'd like to stay up to date and follow along with the very latest rental market and average asking rents, you can tune in to my monthly market update episodes, which are almost always on the first Wednesday of each month. Next up, there's a budget coming. It is apparently set for the 26th of November. Now that is still quite a while away, yet we've already had some worrying and wild rumours about what might be in this November budget. I don't think the rumours themselves or spending time thinking about them is very useful, so I won't be talking about those now or hopefully in future episodes much either. It is worth being aware of the budget though, and listening out for any actual changes that get made on that date or very soon afterwards. I'll make sure I cover anything property related in an episode after the budget once we actually know the facts of what are changing. So that will be coming on the 26th of November for the actual budget, and then probably a week or two after that for an episode of this podcast updating you on what's changed. If anything, maybe it'll all stay the same. Last up, a little article that I think is a little bit in fun, maybe, or maybe a little worrying. And this caught my attention because it had the catchy headline of "Tenants Rate Self-Managing Landlords Above Agents." And you dig into this article, and it's referring to some analysis that has been done on a collection of tenant reviews. And it turns out that they managed to rate landlords at 2.48 out of 5 and agents at 2.32 out of 5. So, in summary, that sounds pretty appalling for everybody. Less than 2.5 out of 5. I would really hope that we as a property industry and as people providing homes to people can do better than that, really. But it got worse. Now, I must say, I'm not sure how they actually worked this out from tenant reviews, but apparently they were able to conclude that only 75.1% of agents had protected tenants' deposits, and only 66.8% of landlords had protected their tenants' deposits. Now, that really is quite concerning. A quarter of deposits are going unprotected, which is not legal anymore. And I would really, really hope that agents would be more on top of this. And if you're choosing to self-manage as a landlord, you do have that responsibility. In fact, even if you're not self-managing, you have a responsibility to check a lot of the compliance things and make sure that your agent is on top of it. But especially if you're self-managing, you really do have a responsibility to stay on top of things. And if you don't want to go and read the rules and regulations and stay fully aware of those, you need to make sure you are at least finding the best in practice checklists and processes and guides to follow the actual critical elements of renting out property and providing homes to people in a way that is legal and safe and compliant. So that's it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed that little selection of news stories. If you'd like more episodes where I go through news and current changes and things, or if you would prefer I didn't do episodes again like this, please do let me know. You can reach me on show@thebusinessofproperty.com. And I'll look forward to speaking to you again next time.